I looked my mother-in-law in the eye and finally said the 6 words she never thought I would. But to understand the weight of those words, you have to understand the weight of the silence that came before them, a silence that lasted for nearly a year. Her name is Carol, and when I first married her son, Mark, she was wonderful. She welcomed me, shared family recipes, told me embarrassing stories about Mark's childhood. I thought I had won the mother-in-law lottery. The shift was so subtle, so gradual that I barely noticed it until I was drowning. It started the day I brought my son, Noah, home from the hospital. Carol was there, of course, and with her came the advice. It started small. "Oh, honey, are you sure he's warm enough in that? In my day, we used 2 blankets." I'd smile and add another blanket. A week later, it was about feeding. "You're breastfeeding? That's nice, but formula would help him sleep through the night. You look exhausted." I'd smile again, my chest tight with a mix of fatigue and a strange new feeling. Shame. For months, every interaction was a gentle erosion of my confidence. She'd rearrange the diapers I'd organized, saying her way was more efficient. She'd buy him loud plastic toys when I'd specifically asked for quiet wooden ones. Each time, I'd bite my tongue. I told myself she was just trying to help. She was from a different generation. I was the new mom, insecure and hormonal. Mark didn't see it. To him, his mother was just being doting. "That's just how she is, Anna," he'd say. "She means well." And I believed it. I wanted to believe it, because the alternative was too painful to consider. That my mother-in-law didn't trust me, that she didn't think I was a good enough mother for her grandchild. The real breaking point, the moment the silence in my soul started to curdle into a silent scream, was over a spoonful of avocado. Noah was 6 months old, and I was excited to start him on solid foods. I had researched everything, talked to our pediatrician, and decided to start with mashed avocado. As I was about to give him his first bite, Carol plucked the spoon from my hand. "Oh, no, dear, far too early. He needs rice cereal first. It's gentler on their tummy." I tried to protest. The doctor said avocado was perfect, actually. She waved her hand dismissively, a practiced gesture of loving authority. "Dr. Schmuchters. I raised 3 children. I think I know a thing or two." And she turned and started preparing rice cereal, leaving me standing there, holding an empty spoon, feeling utterly and completely invisible in my own kitchen. I watched her feed my son his first solid food. A moment that should have been mine was stolen so casually, so kindly, that I didn't even know how to fight back. That night, as I rocked Noah to sleep, I made a promise to myself. I would not be erased from my own motherhood. I didn't know how, and I was terrified of the confrontation. But I knew something had to change. The next time she crossed the line, I would not be silent. I just had to wait for the moment. The moment came 2 weeks later, at the worst possible time. Sunday lunch with Mark's entire extended family present. It was a loud, happy affair, and for the first hour, things were fine. Carol seemed to be on her best behavior. I started to relax, thinking my internal crisis had been an overreaction. And then Noah started to get fussy. He was teething and his naps had been short. I picked him up from his high chair and started rocking him, humming softly. He immediately quieted, resting his little head on my shoulder. A small victory. That's when I heard Carol's voice cut across the table, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You see? He's got you wrapped around his little finger. If you run to him every single time he makes a peep, he'll never learn to self-soothe. You are creating a rod for your own back, Anna." The table fell quiet. A few relatives shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Mark gave me a small, tight smile that said, "Just ignore her." But I couldn't. This wasn't a private comment. This was a public performance. She wasn't just offering advice. She was announcing to the entire family that I was incompetent. In my mind, a Rolodex of a year's worth of slights began to spin. The blankets, the formula, the diapers, the avocado, the constant, unending stream of microaggressions veiled as loving concern. Every time I had swallowed my words to keep the peace, every time I had let her win to avoid a fight, I felt the heat rise in my cheeks, a familiar mix of shame and a new, unfamiliar feeling, fury. I looked at my son, so peaceful in my arms, and then I looked at my husband, who was now carefully studying his mashed potatoes, avoiding my gaze. And I realized a devastating truth. No one was going to stand up for me. Mark wouldn't. He loved me, but he would never confront his mother. This was my battle to fight, my voice to find. I thought about the woman I was before I became a mother. Confident, decisive, unafraid. Where had she gone? She had been buried under layers of self-doubt, exhaustion, and the desperate desire to be liked, to be seen as a good wife and a good daughter-in-law. But holding my son, I understood that being a good daughter-in-law was making me a worse mother, one who was anxious and second-guessed every single instinct. My primary duty was not to keep Carol happy. It was to protect the well-being and peace of my child, and my own. My heart was hammering in my chest, a frantic drum against my ribs. I could feel every eye on the table on me, waiting. They expected me to smile weakly, to nervously laugh it off, to do what I always did. Nothing. But the woman who did nothing, she didn't live here anymore. I took a slow, deliberate breath, met my mother-in-law's expectant gaze across the table, and opened my mouth. I said, my voice calm but unbreakable, "This is not a discussion anymore." The 6 words landed in the center of the table with the force of a physical object. The chatter stopped completely. Carol's perfectly made-up face froze, her mouth slightly agape. She looked like she'd been slapped. Mark's head shot up, his eyes wide with a mixture of shock and panic. Before anyone could recover, I continued, keeping my voice even and my eyes locked on Carol. "I know you raised 3 wonderful children, and I respect your experience. But this is my son. I am his mother, and I will make the decisions for his well-being based on my research, my instincts, and the advice of our doctor. I am happy to hear your stories about your own experiences, but I am no longer accepting unsolicited advice or criticism about my parenting choices." I paused, letting the words settle. So, to be perfectly clear, how I choose to soothe my child, feed my child, or dress my child is my decision to make. It is not a topic for debate at the family dinner table. I need you to respect that. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I had ever heard. It was thick with a year of unspoken tension finally released. Carol just stared at me, speechless for the first time since I'd met her. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. She had no script for this. Finally, she turned to her son. "Mark, are you going to let her speak to me that way?" And Mark, to his eternal credit, looked at me, then at his mother, and did the bravest thing he could have done. He said, quietly but firmly, "She is Noah's mother, Mom. We need to respect her decisions." That was the real victory. It wasn't about shutting Carol down. It was about me finally finding my voice, and in doing so, giving my husband the courage to find his. The rest of the lunch was excruciatingly awkward. But for the first time, it wasn't an awkwardness I was carrying alone. Things didn't magically get better overnight. Carol was distant for weeks, but the dynamic had fundamentally shifted. The constant stream of advice stopped, and when she did offer an opinion, it was phrased as a question. "Have you ever thought about—" a small change, but it was everything. She was no longer dictating, she was conversing, because I had taught her the rules of engagement. By setting that one firm boundary, I didn't start a war, I signed a peace treaty. I claimed my territory as a mother and as the authority in my child's life. I didn't just tell my mother in law where the line was, I showed my son that his mother is a woman who stands up for herself, respectfully, but without apology. And that is a lesson more important than any sleep training method or feeding schedule. So, I want to ask you, what is the boundary you need to set in your life? What are the 6 words you've been holding back, afraid to say? Share your story in the comments. Let's find our voices together. And if the story about setting boundaries resonated, you can watch our story about what happens when you don't and you start to lose yourself by clicking the video on your screen right now.